Good evening and welcome to another edition of Cueball's Cutting Corner. I am Cueball, and tonight we're going to talk about knife maintenance. And why is that important? So let's start off by talking a little bit about knives in general. For tonight, I'm going to use one of my newest acquisitions. This is the Crispy Donut Community Hanson. This one comes with the black G10 sprinkle or black sprinkle version. And this knife does run on ceramic bearings. It has a deep carry pocket clip that's inset, as well as has flat screws. This knife is, I would consider this to be a medium-sized knife for me in my big hands. And to be quite honest, the detent, which is how much force you can build behind that thumb stud or on the flipper tab, however you're going to deploy this knife, how much force you can get behind that to really, take and get a lot of momentum built up and accelerate that blade out when you're deploying it. This particular knife has actually a pretty strong detent, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to adjust that if it's something I'd like to do. I don't think so with this knife because I think over time this is going to really break in the more that I use and deploy this knife. Again, I have not done anything to this knife until now, so but we are going to talk a little bit about also the different parts of the knife and what I call giving the knives the little bit of cue ball magic. And what I mean by that is taking and stripping the knife down and then cleaning it thoroughly and then lubricating it in certain parts of the knife that's going to allow the best opportunity for the best action, and also not over lubricating it because we don't want a lot of dirt and grime to build up inside as well, because the more that you build up dirt and grime, obviously the more often you're going to have to take and clean your knives. And one thing that I've learned over the last few years of being a collector is that with knives, the hardware over time, the more that you unscrew it and screw it back in, and it does weaken the hardware. At least the T6 screws that come with this particular knife on the body screws and also the clip. There's nothing wrong with T6s. However, if you're going to be taking apart your knives, if there's any kind of Loctite that's used to hold them in, you do risk risk stripping out the heads of the screws. So you always want to make sure that when you are disassembling your knives, use a very good driver bit, and you always want to try to use a fresh driver bit if you can. If you start to get rounding over the edges of the bit, like right towards the end, then it's time to not use that bit. It's time to throw that bit in the recycle bin and go ahead and replace it with a fresh one. So I'm going to talk also a little bit about what I use. I think that's where I'm going to start actually. So let me set this down. So when I am putting together my knife kit, I'm thinking of a few different things to add here. The first thing you can see here is I have a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, and I use 99% isopropyl alcohol. This has less water concentration, and so therefore when it evaporates, it doesn't leave as much residue behind. So the higher the concentration, the less water, the less opportunity to leave residue. And when you're working with these knives, you don't want residue to remain on any of the surfaces that are going to be coming in contact with the lubricants or with each other. It's just better, and it just makes it for a cleaner clean. So isopropyl alcohol. Now, if you only have like 91% or 96 or 95%, that's fine. Those will work too. You can see here that I have a variety of different bit drivers here. I have one that I just started recently using. This is actually a driver that's also built into a pry bar, and it comes with 3 different bits. I have right now a T6 bit on this one because I know I'm going to need to take apart the Hanson. And I really like how this works. It has a nice magnetic retention on the bit, and it just feels good in hand. So yeah, until I get something better, I'm going to continue to use this guy. But I also have these Wiha bit drivers. These are also magnetic, and you can get these very reasonably off Amazon. They do work with the quarter drive bits, whereas this one is, I think they call this a 5mm, or it's like an eighth of an inch. Yeah, just, there's a couple different size bits out there that you can get. I also have a Wiha, and these are very reasonable too. Wiha bit holders. You can see I'm missing a few. Yeah, they're somewhere. I gotta find them. But I just brought this out to show you that, again, you don't have to spend a lot of money. I think the 2 drivers and the bit set cost me around between $20 and $25. And if you're taking apart a lot of knives, it's actually very good. That's a very good investment. And Wiha make very good bits. There are also the drivers that come with just the standalone drivers on. They're just a fixed driver. You don't have the replaceable bits at the end. A lot of times those can be very good too, because they use a much harder steel, and so they don't wear out quite as fast as some of these bits do. So again, it just depends on preference, right? It just depends on preference. I also have a flashlight. A lot of people are like, why do you have a flashlight? Well, sometimes, there might be something getting in the way, or you want to look at the knife and inspect it before you take it apart, just to make sure that when you take it apart, things aren't just going to go flying. And so it's always a good idea just to kind of look inside the knife and just, just kind of get an idea of what you're looking at. So when I'm taking and looking at a knife for the first time, I'm just going to take and turn on my flashlight. Hopefully it turns on. Oh, well, it was turning on before. Well, I guess I don't have my flashlight, but that's okay. So I'm pretty sure that, that this is going to be a fairly standard, knife for me to take apart. It's just a liner lock. And so some recessed recessed liners there in the scale, and just a few screws, and it'll come right apart. But if this is your first time taking apart a knife, it can be a little bit daunting because you don't want to mess anything up, because a lot of times knife companies will not cover the parts under warranty. So then you're forced to have to request for parts, and it can cost money and shipping and all that good stuff. One rule of thumb I will say is be very careful when you're, especially on T6s, anything below a T8, and even on T8s too, you want to be careful that you're not applying too much pressure, because if there is Loctite used, then you must heat up the screw to take and burn away or loosen up that Loctite. And there are some knives that come with Loctite. I actually have had a few that come with red Loctite, which is a permanent Loctite. Now the blue Loctite, which you see here, I have this in my knife kit, but I don't use it as often as I used to. And the reason being is that if the proper tension is applied to the pivot, and if everything is working in conjunction, you shouldn't have to use Loctite. However, there are going to be times when you may have to use a little bit of Loctite and let your knife sit for 24 hours, let the Loctite set, because you have like a pivot, that screw that just is being stubborn. It keeps loosening up. If you're fidgety like me with knives, you might deploy the knife and fidget with it. Over time, that pivot screw may loosen up. So it's handy to have some Loctite, and I prefer the solid Loctite, because I can get just a little dab and just apply it. It doesn't take much. The fluid Loctite, which I also have some of that too, but it's just a little bit messier. So I've had this for 2 years. It's still not even close to being done. You'll notice here too that I also have a couple different types of lubricant. So this one is a KPL, and this is an ultralight. I use the ultralight mainly for slip joints, and I use this also with phosphor bronze washers. A lot of my knives have bearings, so I don't use this a lot. This little bottle will last several years, to be quite honest. Unless I'm buying, like 50 knives a month, then maybe this bottle will last only a couple years. But this should last a long, long time. I have regular KPL and also KPL heavy that I've had for a couple of years, and I'm not even through a quarter of the bottle yet. So, and I've taken apart a lot of knives. This is a newer one on the market. This is produced by Justin with OCD-4-EDC. It's called Slick'em All. So this is a product that he has developed. And what's nice about the Slick'em All is it's more of a paste or grease that you put on the knife. So, paste. It's more of a grease, and it's very slippery. But what's nice is that it kind of holds in position. Whereas, with KPL thin, this one is really runny and can take and travel to different parts of the knife that you may not want it to, like on the face of the lock bar. And then all of a sudden you got lock stick and you're wondering, why is my lock sticking so bad? Well, it's probably because you used a little too much KPL ultralight, and it ran and got onto the face of your lock bar. So anyways, that's what the isopropyl is for. I'll take some of that off. But I'm going to use tonight actually Slick'em All, just because I like how it's got a very thin applicator, and I can just dab this where I need it to be. I don't have it's just easier to control for me. And plus, I like to support local people in the community. And Justin and Molly, his wife, they have their business, and it's really awesome to be able to support those people in our community. And I'm not saying that KPL isn't part of the knife community, because it is KPL for Knife Pivot Lube, but much bigger, company, and it's a good product. Don't get me wrong. I am not endorsing, whatever your preference is. I still use KPL. I use it a lot. However, I'm going to use tonight Slick'em All, since this is something I recently just got. All right, so let's get to it. Those are basically the things. Oh, last but not least, a good microfiber towel. You need to have a good microfiber towel, and maybe a couple swabs, even some micro swabs. Sometimes just you want to dab a little bit, just be more strategic, and also just want to make sure that you're targeting a small area. You don't want to get it all over the place. These little micro swabs work very well. They actually have a little bit of microfiber material at the end to hold whatever you're using. You can use them to clean too, but swabs are super important. If you're into pew-pews, you've probably seen swabs like this that come in cleaning kits. But the microfiber towel is so important, and you'll see why here in just a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and get to taking apart this knife. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up the pivot. I always start with the pivot, and this one does not appear to be Loctited, thank goodness. Here, let's get this on screen, and I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way. Don't need that. I obviously don't need my flashlight because it doesn't work. Should have checked that beforehand, but that's all right. It was more for reference. All right, so we have the pivot screw. That's it, pivot screw. Okay, now the rest of this knife, I believe, is T6s. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my pry bar tool, and I'm going to go ahead and start by loosening up. I'm actually just going to go ahead and remove the pocket clip. Why not? Sometimes you don't have to, but when I take apart a knife, I like to take apart everything. That's just how I am, and clean everything and then put it back together. So I'm also going to try to keep these screws orientated to their original positions. So I'm going to set that aside. As you can see here on this clip, one of the screws is shorter than the other. And that's very important when you put this back together, that you get the shorter one here and obviously the longer one in back. So I'm going to keep those together. Okay, and we'll go ahead and start to loosen the body screws here. And it doesn't feel like there was any Loctite used on these. They were just tightened fairly tight. And bear with me, this is my first time doing this on camera, so I apologize. I have a camera that's up in front of me. It's not too bad. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys something here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this screw over here, since it's towards the end of the clip. Try to keep that orientation. So here's one of the scales, and as you can see, I still have one screw here to take apart. And the reason why is that's what's holding in, or one of the screws is holding in, the nested liner. And as you can see, it's recessed into the G10. Not only does that take in help relieve some weight, but it also makes it so you still have the full liner strength of the steel, but in a thinner package. And so it doesn't have to be as thick of a knife. I really like that. Obviously, you have less G10 material. However, it's really the steel liner that's giving this knife its strength. As you can see here, there's the pivot ball. Okay, more than likely that's a ceramic ball. That can either be ceramic or steel. And then you can see this track here, this half circle. So that is where if you look on the blade of the knife here, and I'll pull it up. You can see the stop pin is actually built into, it's actually pressed into the blade itself. And that stop pin is what keeps the blade from bottoming out at the bottom. And then what keeps it in from over or hyperextending when you take and deploy the knife. So that's a very, very important part. Some knives come with the stop pin as built into the actual, it might be a separate component altogether. And then you will have part of the knife tang here, the tang of the blade will be cut out, so it allows for it to take and follow, to pivot around that pin. So, but yeah, I always like knives that have the stop pin that's on inserted through the tang of the blade. I think it just makes it, I don't know, it just makes it cleaner, makes it easier to take apart. I don't know if it really does much in terms of stability, but okay, we lost one of the bearings here. So this is a bearing, and most knives are going to come with either bearings or they're going to come with, see if I can get this into the light here. So there's the bearing. And yes, this is a ceramic caged ceramic bearing. Sometimes you might get stainless steel balls. That's fine. The cages can be brass. It can be plastic like this one. Again, it's nice that these are caged because they don't go flying all over the place. I have a couple knives in my collection that have free floating bearings, and you have to be very, very careful taking those apart. Okay, you can see where the bearing fits into the blade. So it's already worn a nice little channel there. Okay. And on this side, we have a back spacer. So I'm going to take this off. This should actually just pop off, if I'm not mistaken. I may have to loosen these screws because there might be some tension on it. So I'm going to try that first. Very careful here not to strip it. Okay. All right, that one came out pretty easy. Yay! And again, I'm going to try to keep these screws separate from one another. So I'm going to move that down here. And it looks like this has a filler plate. Since it has a reversible pocket clip, we're going to take and remove this screw here. Put these in the orientation that they were originally installed. Right, and there's the smaller screw that holds in the plate, one of the screws that holds in the plate. Now I can take off this back spacer, and you'll see these posts here. These are standoffs, and the back spacer will fit. And most of the time, these will have like a flat side to them. They're actually shaped like a D. I don't know if you can see that. And that makes it nice because when you notice on, I don't know if this knife has it or not. Whoops, don't want to lose these. Very important not to lose these. But if you look, sometimes on the holes, they'll have a D-shaped hole as well. And on this side, like, here we go. This is what I was looking for. So I don't know if you can see this or not. Let me take off the pivot itself. Here's the pivot. Okay. And I just had another bearing just go flying. That's okay. And let's go ahead and remove that liner because I can see there's a lot of oil and grease in there. Again, just be very careful here. Very nice. This was a little bit tight. Okay, that one's going to stay down here. And this liner should just pop out now. Yep, there it goes. All right. As you can see, a lot of oil, from the factory. We're going to get rid of all that. I'll have to clean this mat after I'm done too. Grab this liner. As you can see, again, lots of oil. Yuck, we're going to get rid of all that. But if you notice here back on this liner, these holes have a D-shaped hole. So that makes it to where these aren't going to spin on either side when you go to tighten the knife, and that is such a huge benefit. I hate it when knives come with, when they're not captured like this, when they don't have that D standoff. It's a pain, especially if they use Loctite. Man, then you have to take and use 2 drivers, one on either side, to try to unscrew, and it's really clunky. It's just, you know, you have a better opportunity of actually of stripping out your screws. So can't stand that. All right, we're going to take this last screw out, and we should be completely, whoops, helps if I use the right driver. We should be completely disassembled after this screw. Again, this screw is going to stay up here because I know that's for that one. And here is the lock bar. Again, you have the detent ball. Now that detent ball, if you notice on the blade here, there's the detent hole, okay? So when this knife is deployed, okay, so when it's actually deployed, let's see if I can do that. It's held in by that detent ball. It goes into the little hole, and then when you go to deploy the knife, you're putting pressure against that detent ball, and how it and when it's held into that little spot, and that's what allows you to create that pressure and that momentum to deploy it. And some knives have a very strong detent, and others don't. Now there are a couple things that you can do. Sometimes this hole can be not quite deburred from the factory, and it might actually appear as a weak detent. And sometimes you can take, if you want to add this to your collection of tools, you can take and order these off Amazon, or even Harbor Freight has a set. I think, I brought both my sets out. So one of these I got on Amazon, and one of these I got at Harbor Freight. And all these is just a little needle file set. And these are really, really nice to do fine detail, deburring. If you need to take and maybe there's a sharp edge you want to take and just round off, you can use these to do that, and then finish it off with maybe like a higher grit sandpaper. These are a really nice tool to add. I think I bought this kit for my pew-pews when I was first getting into those, and then I bought this kit because I couldn't find this kit. Yeah, story of my life. All right. So first thing I'm going to do now that I have this knife disassembled, and we did go through all the parts of the knife. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. I'm going to go ahead and take my microfiber towel and douse it, literally douse it with some isopropyl alcohol. Okay, and the reason I'm doing this is I want to get rid of all the grease and oil that came from the factory, and so I want to douse each of these parts and really give it a nice clean. Okay, get in there and just clean the heck out of this knife. And I just knocked something off my work table. No worries. Let me pause here and come back. All right, so again, just trying to get all that oil and grime and gunk from the factory off the original, or off the parts, and so I'm left with a nice clean surface. And then I will choose where I want to apply the lubricant. Now, a lot of times they oil them like this because they're coming from overseas, and shipping conditions can vary depending on what kind of weather, and across the ocean you're dealing with a lot of humidity, and sometimes they're in non-temperature controlled containers, and the humidity can actually cause some of the steel parts to rust. So especially with a steel liner knife. Now this knife is coated, and so therefore it's probably not going to rust, but let's just say that they missed a spot on the coating, and that one spot, that's all it takes for that one spot to start to rust, and then you might see a chain reaction where the coating starts to peel off and the whole thing starts to rust. So as you can see, that isopropyl alcohol does a very, very good job of cleaning the surface and getting rid of all that gunk. Now that we have this lock bar in hand, this one of the things you can do if you want to tighten or improve the strength of your pivot tension, Wait, sorry, it's starting to get late, guys, so I apologize. So if you want to strengthen the detent, you can just ever so slightly just start to bend this in, and you want to try to do it from the base and not towards up, up here. You don't want to bend up here because then that ruins the geometry of the lockup and can mess things up. You don't want to do this. You want to actually have the whole thing, move. So usually I'll take and come back here and just apply a lot of force with my finger. Maybe sometimes if it's a thick steel bar, might take a channel lock, like a small mini channel lock, put a little bit of tape or something so I don't mar it, and then bend it from the base here, but very gently. You don't have to put much pressure on it. And then if you want to weaken the detent, you would just go the opposite way and do it the opposite way. Now, I like where this detent is, so I'm not going to do anything to mess with it because it's nice and snappy. But again, at your own risk, because if you go too far either way, you could mess up the detent for good. So just letting you know. Okay, let me see if I can find that little piece that I dropped here. Whoops, I moved my camera. It went flying. I see it. It's down on the ground. Oh, the lock bar or the foot plate and the screw went out. More screw. Maybe not. No, I got everything here. Okay, so let's bring the camera back in position. I think we're okay. I have this on my gimbal, so it's actually, kind of keeps things rotated, or not rotated, stable. Again, this is my first teardown video, so please bear with me. I'll get better at it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to clean these parts. I still have a little bit of isopropyl alcohol left on here, but I'm just going to redouse it. Again, I'm pretty liberal and generous with my use of this. You can pick up like a case of 12 for like 20 bucks on Amazon. So, which makes it nice. Clean the blade. Definitely want to clean the blade. And this is where using a Q-tip, to get on the inside of the hole here, because a lot of times you can get gunk that's built up. And when we go to re-lubricate that pivot, you don't want it to have the old stuff. We want the new stuff that we're going to apply. I give it a really nice cleaning. Try not to slice myself here. All right. I'm going to clean the lock bar face. So as you can see, there's that face. That's where the lock bar, it's not coated because you don't want it to coat because the lock bar would stick. But yeah, I clean that, make sure that that area is really clean because you do not want any oil or grease on the surface of the lock bar face because it will stick. It actually causes sticky, which is not good. So, okay. Next, I'm going to take the pivot and I'm going to clean off the pivot. Again, it doesn't take long. I'm probably being too thorough. Next thing I'm going to do are the bearings. I don't have fingernails, so it's really hard to grab these. And I just roll them around, in that alcohol-soaked towel, and just make sure that all the gunk and grime is gone. Okay. And then I take and actually kind of test these. Whoops. And I dropped another one, believe it or not. Where did it go? I don't know. There it is. And this is common. I've dropped so many parts on the floor. They go rolling around. Just kind of comes with the territory. But I just want to make sure that it rolls freely. If it does, then I know it's good. I'll take and give it one last wipe to get my oils off from my fingers. Same thing for this one. And I don't go too fast. As you can see, I'm going fairly slow. Obviously hitting my camera now with my chair. I need to get a better chair for doing these videos. So right now it will work, but I'm using my office chair and it's got the leg and I'm just not not really happy with. I need something I can get a little bit closer, like maybe a stool or something. So, okay, so now we're almost done. There's a couple other. One thing I will note, since this is a steel liner, a lot of times, like with titanium knives, with steel, you don't need to have any washer insert, like a steel washer for the ball bearings to travel on. So, because it's steel. So this, you can see that there's already a track wearing in from where the ceramic ball bearings, from the ceramic ball bearings. But some knives that are, I'll give you an example here, like the Ronin, for example. When I took this apart, there are steel washers on the other, on either side of where the bearings can take and travel against, because you don't want the ceramic bearings to travel against titanium. Titanium is a little bit softer material, and so it will wear down and probably wear unevenly too. So that's why they do that with the titanium knives. All right, so we're pretty much clean and ready to go. I'm not going to worry about the clip. The clip didn't have any oil in it. Oh, there is a little bit of oil in the back spacer, so let me get that. So let's give that a nice little clean. Okay, and then we can start putting this knife together again. Right. Awesome. I think, is that aluminum? Yeah, this is an aluminum backspacer. That's cool. I think it said this was G10, but I think it's aluminum. So yeah, it looks like it because it's coated. Ah, interesting. Okay. All right. So how I start typically is I start with the show side scale down flat. And the reason I do this is because it's just easier to build from this piece up, because the pivot's going to have to go through here and then through all the other pieces. And with this knife, it has what's called a captured pivot. It's a D-shaped pivot. So similar to those standoffs from earlier, this also has a flat side to it. And so when it marries up with the opposite side, which will be, let's see if I can find it. Actually, it's kind of cool. It actually starts off on the show side with the D side. So this makes it super easy to align, because it's only going to fit in through this hole one way, right? So when I get ready to put the other pieces on, I don't have to worry about this thing spinning or rotating, and it can be a hassle, trust me. So we're going to start with, this is just excess alcohol. We're going to start by putting down, there's a spot here, clean this up a little bit. We're going to start by putting this liner in, giving it one last little wipe. Again, I'm very meticulous about keeping things clean. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the pivot through, so that'll kind of hold everything into place. And then what I'm going to do is attach these standoffs. Okay, so I'm going to attach the standoffs to either side. And because this side has the D-shaped standoff holes, this will make it really easy for me to put these in and get them secured down. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and try to do this on camera if I can. 56s. Oh, this is the wrong screw. I'm sorry. This is supposed to go on the plate here. Flathead. Yeah, these two go for the plate. I need, sure I'm right on here. Let's go ahead and secure the. We'll go ahead and secure the liner down. That was a smaller one here. My fingers are really large, so this is kind of hard for me. My dexterity as I'm getting older is not as good as it used to be. Yeah. And we'll get it though. And just go slow. Okay, I'm not going to over tighten these. I'm actually going to leave these a little bit loose because I want everything to come together, and I'll loosen or tighten everything at the end once I have everything initially put together. All right. So I believe this one, that guy. Sure I'm right on this. Yeah, that's definitely the right guy. Just getting this started. It seems like it's a T8 though. Maybe this is a screw to another knife. I just happened to pick it up off the ground. Who knows? I know this is a T6 there. I think it's this. I think this one's the right one. Yeah, this one's the right one. Okay, we'll get this. I'm confident. Here, let me bring this up so you can see it on the camera here. Move these out of the way. And I hope the lighting is good enough here. I'm kind of curious how this is going to turn out on the video. Okay, there we go. Screw. One thing about this driver is it's not magnetic, and I don't think these are titanium screws, but yeah, it is what it is. Okay, now we're cooking. Again, I'm not going to tighten this all the way. I'm just trying to get it assembled first. Now we should have another E-shaped standoff. And it can only go in one way. And now I need the filler plate. So let's grab that guy. And that can only go in one way as well. And I know that the shorter screw needs to go up front. So we'll start by dropping that guy in. Okay, and just give it a nice couple turns. And then we have the longer screw in the back here. Okay, and that's going to attach that standoff here to the scale. Again, I'm going to leave it a little bit loose. All right, so we got the pivot in. We're good. And we got to start lubricating this a little bit. I'm going to give this another nice little wipe. I still have some alcohol residue on my towel here, which is good. Okay, keep things nice and clean. Before that, let me go ahead and install the back spacer, and this really can go only one way. Get that put on there, and I leave, again, if you tighten the standoffs too tight, this can be a pain to put on. So you want to leave it a little bit loose, and then when you get it, maybe I did have it the wrong way. There's two ways that it can install. There we go. That's much better. Okay, so now that's on there. Once I tighten this will just all come together. Be very stout. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and just give a little bit of my Slick'em All onto the pivot. Just a little bit, and then I'm going to use one of my little microfiber just to rub that around. Again, the Slick'em All is great because it will just stay in place. And again, you don't have to use a lot of lube, a lot of grease, or just enough to coat it. And then I'm going to lay this down flat. And it's always nice to work on a flat surface. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little of this Slick'em All onto the end of this swab and get it kind of prepped here to start applying to some of the parts. Okay, there we go. All right, so it's got a lot of lubricant there on the tip. I'm just going to start to apply a nice coating here to the bearing. And I don't need to put it along the whole bearing because as it's spinning around, it will distribute some of the grease. So Okay, we're going to drop that bearing on. Okay. And the next part is going to be the blade itself. I'm going to go ahead and just give a nice little swab of Slick'em All on the inside here. Okay. And then also on the inside of the pivot hole itself. Great. Now, I am going to take a tiny bit of the Slick'em All and just dab it into that pivot hole so it will just come in and out nice and smooth, and just a little bit of Slick'em All along each end of the track here where the ball bearings have created this track. And again, it's not a lot. As you can see, I did not put a lot of lube on this, okay? Just enough. These are small parts we're dealing with, so we don't need to take and use a lot. Okay, so we're going to drop the blade on. Okay, and then we have the other ball bearing here. Again, I'm just going to take and put a little on there, and then I'll spread it around with my swab, both sides. Okay, I'm going to drop that in. And then I'm going to prepare the next scale. And when you use isopropyl on G10, it will actually dry out the G10 some. If that happens, all you need to do is just take your finger in a little bit of water, and it will rub some of the oils of your finger into all the little grooves of the G10 itself, since this is a porous material, and it'll actually make this black again. So a lot of times you'll get this kind of this white film look, and that's okay. It's not going to hurt the G10. It's not doing anything to degrade its strength. However, it does, it doesn't appear as appealing. So when I get done with this knife, I'm going to give it a nice wipe with my finger and a little bit of water, and it will actually darken this up. But the isopropyl alcohol tends to dry the G10 out a little bit. Okay, we're going to go ahead and tighten down this steel liner, this side. And again, I'm not tightening this completely tight. I want it to not be super tight because I want the pieces to be able to jiggle a little bit to get into position, and then I can tighten everything down. Okay, so now that we have that done, I'm going to give this one final wipe. And then I'm also going to give just a little bit of Slick'em All here to the detent ball itself. Make sure that that comes out. Yep, there we go. And just a little bit around the bearing track. We're good to go. All right. That is my Cueball magic. First thing I'm going to start with is putting the pivot back in. Again, I'm not tightening this all the way yet. Just to get it in there to hold things together so I can get the rest of the screws put in. Okay. All right. And so I want to now make sure this snaps shut. I'm going to close the blade to prevent myself from getting cut, at least give myself a better opportunity. I'm going to take my final body screw here and screw that in. You know what? I think I know where this other black screw goes. I was missing this from another knife, and I will, I think I gave it away already, though, without the screw. So it's not really going to matter. I'll just use it for surplus parts. Maybe it'll fit another knife, who knows. Okay, so last but not least, we're going to go ahead and install the clip. And remember that back screw is longer because that does take and tie together that back standoff along with the screw on the other side with the filler plate. And again, I'm not tightening these too tight yet. So now I have the knife put together, and you can see that it's, the action's not there because I haven't tightened everything down yet. So I'm going to go ahead now and tighten the pivot. You can see it still had to be tightened quite a bit. And I'm only going to tighten it enough to where I'm not really putting any pressure to tighten. I'm just, once I feel it stop, I'm going to just stop. Okay. So now I'm inspecting the knife. All right. Is it off center? yes, it does appear to be off center, and there's a way to correct that. But does it have the action that I'm looking for? Oh yeah. The detent is nice and snappy, but it's a little bit smoother. Oh, that's crisp. Let's check the thumb set action out. Yeah, like it. How about the thumb deployment? That's perfect. My favorite is the reverse deployment, but this one's a little bit harder because the detent and where the thumb set's located, my middle finger doesn't really quite drop. I have to position it in the right spot. I mean, it works fine. But to be quite honest, my thumb is in a much better spot for the deployment of this knife using the thumb sets. Whew, snappy guy. So I'm just kind of working the lubricant into all the parts where I applied it. And it is nice and buttery. Woo! But I still have this problem with the blade not being centered. And I have a little bit of OCD. Get it from my dad. And I can't deal with that. So how do you fix that? Well, there's a couple ways that you can do this. I have to grab a piece of paper really quick. So hold up. Right, so I usually keep handy, oops, sorry for the camera, guys. My chair, again, is hitting the tripod. That's what it's doing. Let's see if I can get this back into position. There we go. That's good. All right. So just a sticky note. Keep these handy. They come in really, really handy. And when I prepare this, all I'm going to do is fold this a few times. And what I'm going to do is use this as a wedge, okay? And may want to go one more time. We'll see. Let's go one more time. I'm going to fold it one more time. See if I can get this an even fold. Yeah, good enough. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, since the blade is favoring the clip side, I'm going to go ahead and install this wedge. Ooh, that tip is so thick. I don't know if I can get that in there. I may have to go back to one less fold here. But I'm going to install that on the side and push that blade to the opposite side where I want it to actually center up. So I know I need to push it towards the show side to center it up. So I'm going to go ahead and put that wedge in there, okay? And then I'm going to tighten the pivot screw as tight as I can get without stripping it, okay? Now, I don't want to strip this, so I'm just going really slow. And when I can kind of feel like a lot of resistance, I know that I'm there. I don't want to strip the pivot screw. Trust me, you don't want to strip the pivot screw. Say it again with me. You do not want to strip the pivot screw. All right, I'm just kidding. So now that I have done that, I'm going to go to the opposite side of the knife, and I'm going to tighten and then loosen. Of course, I should have tightened all these screws first before doing this. Maybe that was my problem. Yeah, it is what it is. Let me go ahead and tighten all these guys the way that they should be. Okay. But what I'm going to do is actually just loosen these about a half to quarter turn to a half turn, okay? And then I'm going to retighten them. And what that does is it helps kind of realign the scales. When you take out the wedge, and then now you loosen the pivot, because again, it's really tight right now. So I want to make sure that I don't have it too tight. And you can actually see if I can get this on camera. You can see when you tighten, see how the blade is moving when I tighten the pivot? See right there is about where it's nice and centered. At least looks good enough for me. What I'm going to do now is check the action and check the lockup. Is it solid? Oh yeah, there is no movement to this blade whatsoever, okay? And then I'm gonna check it again. I can probably loosen this up just a little bit more because there was no blade rock whatsoever, and get it even more centered. And as you can see now, that is much more centered than what it used to be when I first put it back together. Pretty neat trick. And if you need help, feel free to reach out. And I'm checking again, making sure that there's just a tiny bit of wiggle towards the very end, but when I get close to the pivot, it's rock solid. Might just go a little tiny bit tighter. This is where just kind of making those micro adjustments, taking your time, is going to help out. Yeah, that's much, much better. Okay, now is the action still there? Oh yeah, smooth as can be. Wow, I'm loving that. Look at that, that is so smooth. QSP did the OEM on this knife, and they just always have done really good action on their knives. I have a couple of their higher end Penguins, and really just love the action on those knives. Boy, this is beautiful. Beautiful on the reverse. Again, the detent is just so snappy on this knife. Good job, Luke and Drew, for, yeah, choosing QSP and then also making sure that they kept this nice snappy detent. Yeah, knife feels good in the hand. It's just a great pocket size knife. It's a little bit small for my hands, but really, for what I'm using this knife for, opening up boxes, cutting string, cutting tape, that kind of thing, opening up letters. I mean, it's just a good, and plus this has a nice hollow grind, and then at the end, it's compound ground right at the end to give this just a super strong tip. This is not going to snap that easy. I'd have to be doing something really stupid. Okay, so now that we got the knife back together, again, you notice I didn't use any Loctite. The only time that I would use some Loctite, maybe on the pivot, is just if the pivot screw over time of fidgeting, deploying this knife over and over and over again, it starts to loosen up. And you can tell that because it's going to develop some blade rock. Okay, so side to side blade rock. But this one's not doing it, so I'm just going to leave it the way it is, and we'll call it good. All right, we are almost at 53 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this one up. I will save the other knife for another video, maybe when I'm doing one of my dress-up videos. But I hope this video has helped out. Some people out there are very cautious or maybe just a little bit scared of taking their knives apart, and I understand. I actually have messed up a few knives and have learned through lessons and trials and tribulations, what to do and what not to do. But there's a lot of people out in the community that do this and are willing to help. And if you run into any problems, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Cueball981 on Instagram. And, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. This to me is very therapeutic. I love sitting here and taking apart a knife, cleaning it up, and reassembling it and getting it, the action dialed in, getting the blade centered. There's just something therapeutic about it. So I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something today. If not, if you're a seasoned knife tinkerer, well, let me know your thoughts. What are some tips and tricks that maybe I didn't take and provide tonight in my video that you can share with in the comments? So please don't forget to subscribe and to hit the like button. That's if you'd like to, obviously. I enjoy doing this content to share my love and passion for knives. Again, this is a part of the hobby that I enjoy doing immensely, is just taking these knives apart and just getting that oh so smooth action. Yay! Nice tight lockup. Yeah, this thing's even 3 times better than what it was from the factory. Love it. All right, that about does it for tonight. Thank you again. Go out, have a good day, and until next time, God bless.